So this is like a high level overview how the setups look like. So we can see now that our migration was successful. You can see the whole graphical section, how your configuration pipelines look like. It is collecting the system logs. I have one panel for this, and then also visualize the error rate in a time series. Hello everyone, welcome to another session, and today we're gonna learn something amazing, especially for the Docker users, how you can migrate your existing Docker setup. We are using Grafana Loki with Promtail to Grafana Alloy. The reason is that the Promtail is now end of life and Grafana Alloy is the new future. So this is today's agenda. We will cover the topics like why Promtail is now end of life and some introduction about Grafana Alloy. We will discuss its advantages and features. And then we will go to the installation setup where we'll set up the environment. And then in the migration setup, we will basically look the strategy that how you can migrate your existing Promtail configuration file into Grafana Alloy with minimal effort and basically keep your dashboards intact without any problems. And then we will understand the configurations, also take a look at the advanced troubleshooting and debugging practices. And finally, we will also take a look at the limitations. And yeah, there is one more bonus section where we will go through some exercises as well. So let's get started. My name is Usman Ahmad and I work in Grafana Labs as a staff developer advocate. And basically, I use open source tools, especially Linux, a lot. And I create these videos. You can check all the videos which I have created on my YouTube channel, where you can find videos regarding Linux, Docker, Kubernetes, Grafana, and so on. And if you like, you can definitely subscribe and stay up to date. So before we begin, it is important that if you are new to Loki or new to Grafana or new to understand the concept of log file visualization or how to use a log aggregation tool, then I suggest that you watch these two videos. Start with the first one, which is the visualized log file, because this will create a fundamental concept like how to visualize logs, what tools are needed, and how to use Grafana with Loki. And if you are interested how to migrate your existing Linux solutions to Grafana Alloy without any additional effort, then please watch the Grafana Alloy video as well. The links are available in the video description, so please check them out. So let's discuss about Promtail. So Promtail is basically an agent for Grafana Loki. So what it does is that it scraps the logs from your machines, either you are running Linux or Docker containers or even Kubernetes, and then it sends those logs to the Loki. The Loki is basically the server and Promtail work as an agent. So basically it ships all the logs to the Loki, then Loki, the server, ingest it, and then you use Grafana to visualize it. So the Promtail architecture is monolithic, so it is not very easy to maintain if you're using on a bigger machines where you have like a server farm with a lot of clusters, or especially using Kubernetes. Also, it is limited to the logs. So Promtail as an agent has only one purpose, that it collect the logs and ship it to the Loki, and it does not collect any other telemetry data, for example, metrics, traces, profiles, and so on. So this is the official statement from Grafana Labs that Promtail is now basically end of life by March 2026. So we are already now ahead of that time. And as you can see that it is written that the future or the way to go forward is to use Grafana Alloy. So now let's take a look what is Grafana Alloy and why it is superior to Promtail. So Grafana Alloy work as an agent also to collect data, but it does not collect any data. It basically collects all the telemetry data. So it can collect log, metrics, and traces, and even profiles. And basically it is the replacement for your Promtail if you're using Grafana Loki on your Docker machines. It has several advantages. So basically the Grafana Alloy is again an open source project. You don't need to pay for it to use it. You can use it open source freely on any machine, on any device. Another major advantage of using Grafana Alloy is that it is OpenTelemetry compatible. So basically, if you are aware in the CNCF landscape, OpenTelemetry is now one of the most used and active projects after Kubernetes. So basically, Grafana Alloy can also be used as a replacement for OpenTelemetry. It is totally supported. It supports the OpenTelemetry protocol. Grafana Alloy also has its own built-in web UI. So basically, it is very helpful if you want to investigate what's going on, how my setup looks like, and even to troubleshoot any issues with your configuration. And last but not least, it goes beyond logs. So Grafana Alloy collect all the telemetry data. So basically, you have a single agent which can collect everything, and you don't need to put additional agents to collect, for example, for tracing, something for metrics. No, just one single agent or one single tool, Grafana Alloy, and it does all the job for you. So this is how the comparison looks like before and after using Promtail and Alloy. So right now in your Docker setup, you have maybe multiple Docker containers up and running, and Promtail is the default agent which scrapes logs and send logs to the Loki, and then you use Grafana to visualize. So this is now obsolete or not supported anymore, because you will not get any support for Promtail any further from the Grafana labs. So the new way to do this is basically that you keep everything intact, except that you replace the Promtail agent with the Grafana Alloy. While the rest remains same, you don't need to change anything on your dashboard or on your Loki query side. The queries remains the same, the dashboard remains the same, and even nothing to do any changes on your applications which are running in a Docker environment. So we will just understand how you can replace the agent part and keep everything as normal. So this is like a high level overview how the setups look like. So basically your applications are still up and running in your Docker environment, and the only change is the Grafana Alloy. And this is our telemetry collector. It scrapes the log from your containers, send it to the Loki, and then visualize in a Grafana dashboard. So this is the complete picture. For those who are new to Grafana Alloy, this is like a design overview how Alloy works. So basically, you have your infrastructure or application running either in a Docker, Kubernetes, or Linux environment. And basically, once you set up Alloy, it will be able to collect all the telemetry data. So here are some symbols to represent. So the first one is the OpenTelemetry, the one on the top. Then for metrics, you can use Prometheus as well. For logs, you can definitely use Grafana Loki, or probably will be using Loki currently. And also for profiling, you can use the Pyroscope. And data is sent to your backend storage, and then you use some sort of a tool to visualize it. Like in our case, we will be using Grafana. So now let's take a look at the system requirements. So for operating system, you'll probably be using Windows, Linux, and Mac. It depends. You can use any of these. It's all fine. Environment should be Docker, because this is a Docker guide. So you need to have Docker. The minimum hardware requirement is that you need to have at least one CPU, 512 MB of RAM, and 1 GB of disk space. So these are the minimum requirements, but it depends on your use case that you may require more resources. So for that, check your applications. If you are high on load, so you may need to increase some of the following parameters. For the ports, Grafana will use the port 3000, Loki will use the 3100, and the Grafana Alloy will use the port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So make sure that these ports are open in your firewalls, so we can able to access it without any problems. So now let's take a look at the demo. Also, I have created this guide, which I will share the link in the video description, which explain also what I have said in the video. It also contains more details, which you can take a look. Basically, we help you to understand how to get started with Grafana Loki. Again, this video is for everyone. If you are new to Grafana or Grafana Loki with Alloy, this will definitely helps you a lot, and also able to set up. So let's start with the demo part. So I have sent a link to a GitHub repo where I have basically put the minimal Docker Compose code where it is running Grafana with Promtail and Loki. So what you can do is that basically download or clone it and deploy it on your server. So now I will download this code. I will use the git clone command. You can download it via as a zip file. I'm already logged into my virtual machine, so I will do git clone and paste it, right? And if we do ls, you can see a new directory called docker dash grafana. So let's do a cd to it. And let me give you an overview how the directory structure look like. So let's type the tree command, and you can see that we have a docker compose.yaml file. Then we have a Loki directory, and where we have two configuration files, Loki configuration file and Promtail configuration. There is also a README file which explain like how you can download or start this repo and set it up in your environment. So let's take a look at the Docker Compose file. So let me do vim. So basically, this is a very minimal setup. So I try to keep it as simple as possible so that it is easy for anyone who are new to Grafana Loki or even Alloy understand the concept and be able to change it. So this is the Grafana service. So again, it's very basic. We define Grafana with an image, with a container name. We define the ports and also define its default volume path. Then for Loki, we define the container name, the image, and then we define the volume path. So basically it is pointing to the configuration file. And all of these settings are basically taken mostly from the Grafana Labs documentation, but I just put it all in a single place so that it is easy to understand. And similarly, same story follows for the Promtail that we define the volumes. The only new change which you may not found there in the documentation on the Grafana Lab side is that I put some custom configuration which are normally required for the Docker path. So basically, I define these paths. So first is to connect with the Docker socket, then giving the path for the environment, which is the var log. So we are using the var log with a read-only parameter. Then we define the Promtail configuration path. Then we also define the Docker containers path, and again using the read-only mode. And finally, we define this command so that it gets executed so that the Docker can read the configuration file. And at the very end, we have this Grafana storage parameter. So if we make any changes or simply shut down our containers, the data remains there in the volumes, and we can still have, for example, our dashboards or our data source configuration remains intact without any loss. So that is required if you want to keep the storage persistent. So I will quit from here, right? And now let's take a look at the Promtail configuration very quickly. So again, I will go Loki, Promtail, and this is our Promtail configuration. If you are familiar with Promtail, you probably understand that there is nothing much new. So our main job is to collect the container logs. So basically, this is the host, right? And labeling for our containers. So we are basically defining extra configuration. And then we are also collecting the logs from the system as well. So anything on the var log side, we can be able to collect it as well. So this is pretty much simple. And now let's deploy the container image. So we will do docker compose up -t. It has deployed all the services for us. And if we go on our browser and let's do 192.168.122.115 and port 3000, then probably we will able to see the Grafana landing page, and we type the admin as default username and password and click login. So now if we go in connections and data sources, we have already one. So I defined this for testing, but let's start from scratch. So we click on add new data source button and then click on Loki. right? And we give it a name as Loki Alloy, right? Currently, it is running with Promtail, but what we want to do is that we want to use the same data source which you have already defined or may not have defined. Again, depends on your use case, but since this is a demo environment and we haven't done anything before, so we name it as Alloy. It's a logical name, but keep in mind currently we are using Promtail, but we will migrate to Grafana Alloy and see how it works. So let's define HTTP localhost 3100. So 3100 is the default port for Grafana Loki. And let's click save and test. Or maybe I can give the name of the container. It is Loki. So that may work as well in this case. And yes, it is working. So now we have a successful data source configured for our current setup. So let's go into the Explore view. So we'll click on Explore. Let's change the Loki Alloy data source. So the default one is Loki, but we will use the one which we have configured in this video. So let's select label as container and the value, let's say Grafana, and let's see if it is working. Yes, it is working. We can see some of the logs. So that means our setup is working fine. So this is all good. Now, what we're gonna do is that we will just create a basic dashboard for the Grafana container itself. So basically we go in dashboard, new dashboard, add visualization and select Loki Alloy. And let's do a container is equals to Grafana, and we change the panel to logs, and let's click on refresh, and yes, we can see all the logs here. We will save it as like a Grafana container logs. So this is all fine. Save it, and let's save it as new dashboard. Okay, now this is all good. We can also confirm from Docker PS that all of our services are up and running. And now we will move to the migration part. So now what we will do is that we will shut down it, add the Alloy service, and see how we can migrate to it. So do Docker compose down. And now we will edit the Docker compose file. So we'll do a vim docker compose.yaml. And here we will add the Grafana Alloy service section. And let me go in insert mode. And I will just paste this and explain you. So basically this piece of code is taken from the Grafana Labs documentation. It has all the guides also for other, and you can just check this page. I put this here because it is what we needed, and since we are using some of the configuration files, so I will explain how it works. So this is the image name here, Grafana Alloy, and using the latest, okay, the container name is Alloy. The port for Grafana Alloy is 12345. And now try to understand the volume. So it is relatively very easy. So the first line is basically about the Grafana Alloy configuration file. So the config.alloy is the configuration which we will create also on our directory. And the original part on the container side for this configuration is etc alloy config.alloy. Okay. And now you will see all these var logs are mapped with var logs. So basically what we are doing here is that I define all these as same as here. So basically there is no change between these two. So the idea was that we want to migrate our Promtail configuration files in Grafana Alloy. So we keep things as simple as possible and as same as possible. Now on the command parameter, we are basically telling Grafana Alloy that run its configuration file and also listen to the HTTP Web UI on the port 12345. And also the storage part for Grafana Alloy is this one. And then lastly, we define the Grafana Alloy is dependent on Grafana Loki, because Alloy will send the logs to the Loki. So Loki is waiting for Grafana Alloy in other way. So yeah, that's pretty much for Alloy. Now, it is important to understand that you cannot run Grafana Alloy and Promtail together, so it doesn't make sense. So what we will do now is that we will not use the Promtail service sections at all. Instead of commenting it out, we will use the Docker profile command. So basically here I will write profiles, and then I will define as Promtail EOL. Okay. So basically what it means, so we are defining in our profiles that we will not run Promtail service sections at all unless we say that run this specific profile. So to understand what is Docker profiles, so I give you an idea. So Docker profiles, click here. And basically, it is a way to define or active a specific service section in your Docker Compose file. So if you want to run that specific service that you have defined with a profile, you have to give the profile name in the Docker run or Docker Compose command. Then it will work. Otherwise, it will not get executed. So now let's try to test it out. So this is all fine. So let's save it and then do a Docker Compose up -t. Okay. Oh yeah, we did a mistake. So let me fix that. So basically, remember I told that I need to create the config.alloy file, which I haven't done in the beginning. So what happened is that Docker tried to create it, but it went with the wrong permissions. So let me remove it. So we will use the touch command to create the config.alloy file. Okay, and this is a good practice because this is how you learn the debugging. And just to give you an overview, so right now in this config.alloy file, there is nothing. It is totally empty, right? So just to give you a complete overview, so let me clear the screen and do a Docker Compose. Docker Compose up -t. And now notice that we have only 3 containers up and running. So Grafana, Loki, and Alloy. And you do not see the Promtail container at all. So if we do a Docker PS, you can see that we have only this container which are up and running fine. There are no problems, which is good, but there is no Promtail container. And this is what we wanted. So now if we go back to the Web UI, and if I click on home, I needed to save this dashboard. Yes, fine. Let's do a refresh, right? And if we go in data sources and click on our Grafana Loki Alloy one, data source is configured. But if we go in explore and try to use something, you see that there are no labels found. So right now the configuration for Grafana Alloy is empty. And since we disable or did not active the Promtail service, so the configuration for the Promtail service is not being used. So this confirms that we are on the right track. Now let's take a look how we can migrate the Promtail configuration into the Grafana Alloy. So Grafana Alloy comes with a built-in command called alloy convert, which basically convert your existing Promtail configuration into the Grafana Alloy format. And this information is available on the Grafana documentation page. So this is the command, which is alloy convert, and then it asks for the format. So the format will be Promtail, and then the output will be asked like where is the output file, which part where you want to have the output file, and what is the input part so that it can read it and use it for the conversion, right? The problem here is that since this command is easy if you are using on Linux, because then you can run it directly, but in a Docker environment, it is different because you have to access the container. Now, there is one option that you can use Docker run command and define it, but it will be not so easy. It will be a nightmare because you have to define the whole path and run a long string. And if you forgot, then you have something you have to do it again and again. So the strategy which I find it much better is that create a service inside our Docker Compose file and define it under a profile. like what we did with Promtail, so that once we only call it, it executes, run the jobs, and then it exits and it stays there if we want to modify or change anything later on. So how we gonna do it? So basically we will edit our Docker Compose file. We will define this section in our Docker Compose YAML file. So basically this is a service which I created. It's called Converter. So it basically uses the image Grafana Alloy, and the name of it is Alloy Converter. And the volume are defined is that use the existing Promtail configuration file. So the current configuration which we download from the GitHub repository, it has the path of Loki/Promtail config.yaml, and keep it that way. Don't do any changes, and also read the configuration and load it as it is for the Grafana Alloy. Remember, the config.alloy is empty, so there is nothing. And then we use the entry point. We tell that use this entry point and run this command. So basically what we saw here in the documentation, that this alloy convert command, we can define this via a service and giving the same parameter. So we tell that use alloy convert. This is the source format, right? The output is the same location as for the config.alloy because it is currently empty, and read the input from here. So this is the config promtail.config.yaml, which we have defined here. So basically you can change it to any of your choice. I keep it as config because it makes more logical sense as well, right? And now at the end, we define a profile which says convert. So let's see how we can use it. So I will just do a quit of it by saving it. So now we will run the Docker Compose service and we will run the converter service only. So how we will do it? So we'll do Docker Compose -- profile, and the name of our profile is converter convert only, and run converter. So basically the profile name is convert, which we have defined in our compose file, but the service name is converter. So it will only run the converter service once. And if we press enter, it has done its job. And let's take a look at the config.alloy path. So if we do vim config.alloy, so we can see now that our migration was successful in terms of configuration. That means that it has converted the current existing Promtail configurations into the Grafana Alloy format and define all these things. And let's do a diff command to compare it side by side. So we will do diff -y, and we will do config .alloy, and then do a Loki Promtail config.yaml and do color output as well. So in the Promtail, we always need to define the server and the positioning sections. We do not need in Grafana Alloy. What we need in Grafana Alloy is we need to define what it needs to be discovered. So it discover the Docker logs, then what are the source file, and then it defines the write path. So basically most of our settings are taken from here and being used here, right? So this is what the configuration migration looks like. And now let's try to test this. So let me clear the screen. So now let's do a Docker Compose up and see the whole stack and see if the migration is working fine. So do a Docker Compose up -t. And if you see this warning, this is very normal because what happened is that when we run the converter command, it created a temporary converter, and then it remains abandoned. So it is giving us this warning that it found an orphan container, and we can simply remove it. So what we will do is that we will do a Docker Compose down. Okay, you can do that. And then run again the Docker Compose up, but do a remove orphans option. And now oops, I think I did something. Oh, I did not run in the detached mode, so that is why it is showing me everything. Let me stop that. Yeah, so we will run the same command. Let me clear the screen. Yeah, so we will run the same command, docker compose up with -d, and then do a -- remove orphans. And it has actually removed the container at that time as well, but since I forgot to attach the -d, the detach mode, so that is why I was in the console. But again, no problems, it's all good, it's for best practice. So now you have all the containers up and running, and let's do a docker ps, and we can confirm that all of our containers are up and running. We will go into the web UI and see that if we have everything under control. So again, we are in the Grafana Loki Alloy one, and now we are using the actual Alloy configuration. Again, Promtail is not there to confirm you that there is Grafana Alloy, the Grafana itself, and the Grafana Loki. So let's click on Save and Test and see that if we can explore some logs. So again, yeah, we can see now, and let's do Alloy itself. Let's see if we can see now the Alloy logs, which is excellent. So that confirms that our setup is up and running. And I also want to show you the Grafana Alloy Web UI. So let's copy this and do a port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the Grafana Alloy Web UI, and basically you have these options. So basically, first of all, it is telling us all the components, and this is all healthy, and where these components are coming from. So these are coming from the configuration file, the config.alloy file, which we have defined, and you can view it. So it gives you more detailed overview via the web UI, what you have defined, what kind of rule we have set for our containers, what we are exporting. So this is the first one. Then we can look at the Loki source container logs section. And this is what it collecting from the target. So this is all the data we are collecting, and it gives you more debug information as well. And you can check all of it. The one cool thing which I really find it very useful, that if you click on the graph, you can see the whole graphical section, how your configuration pipelines look like. So our pipeline looks something like this, that we have container logs, which we are discovering via Docker and also relabeling them. Then it is fed to the Loki source, where it collects all the container logs. Also, it is collecting the file system logs as well. And then finally, it is writing to the storage path, where we are basically using the logql or the query language to collect all the logs in a visualized format. So basically, if we go back here in our dashboard and click on the new dashboard and do a refresh, we can still see all the logs. So basically, if we edit it and change the container from Grafana to Alloy and do a refresh, we still see all the logs for the Alloy. So basically now this confirms that our setup is up and running. Now let's talk about some troubleshooting parts. So basically it can happen that you run into some problems and you cannot able to debug it. So the best way is to check the logs. So for example, if let's say that your Alloy container is not behaving correctly, or there are some issues in it, so what you can do is that you can type this command docker compose logs Alloy, and then you can see all the Alloy logs and identify if there are any problems. This can also help you to see what's going on. Also, you can use this command. So let me clear my screen. So basically, this is the curl command, and what it is doing is that it is trying to listen to the Loki write, because as we saw in our pipeline, that the Loki write is the final endpoint of the pipeline where all the logs are written, and if it get listened or not. So basically, we are doing a curl on our local host to the Alloy port and collecting the metric, and what we exactly are trying to collect is the Loki write. So if we press enter, we can see all this information. Basically, these are log QL metrics or the data which is listened by the Alloy. So this also confirms that Alloy is able to connect to the Grafana Loki server and able to ship all these metrics that confirms it is working fine. Now let's talk about some of the Grafana Alloy's limitation. So the first is definitely there is a learning curve. You need to understand it better. And my suggestion is that check out my videos. I have actually created 2 additional videos in the past on Grafana Alloy that can help you to understand it better. So check the links in the video description. And live debugging. So what this means, so basically when we are here in our graphical mode, or let's click on the home one, and if we want to take a look at the Loki write default, you see that live debugging is not yet able for this component. What it means, basically what we see here are the components in the entire pipeline, and not every component has the debugging option as well. Debugging means that you can check or verbose, advanced or detailed logs, which are very helpful to understand what are the problems, what are the symptoms. So this maybe needs some more time to get a debugging option for each of these components. Yes, I want to give you this exercise challenge because I think this is the best way you can learn more, not only just about Grafana, but how to visualize log files with Alloy and Loki. And for example, I have created this complete dashboard section, and you can see that it is collecting the system logs. I have one panel for this, and then there is a panel to collect the total amount of errors. So for example, Alloy is right now producing 12 errors, Grafana 1, Loki 2, and also visualize the error rate in a time series style graph, and also collect the Docker host error log. So I have created all these panels, and I want to give you this exercises. Try it yourself and let me know if you need help. I can do a session on this as well, like how you can create these panels easily. It is not difficult, but it is definitely a fun exercise which can help you to get to a more better understanding of the whole ecosystem. So thank you very much for watching this video. Feel free to ask your questions in the video comments. Also, don't forget to check the video description where it contains all the links to the important resources where you can build your foundation, how Grafana Loki works, or how the log file or log aggregation tool works. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to stay up to date. I have videos already about Linux, Docker, Grafana, Kubernetes, and so on. So yeah, thank you again. I will see you in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye bye.